single user mode is a little bit interesting. Um, so, like, one of the things you can do is run SSH or a web server. Now, the caveat with doing that is that you're going to be running as the same user as the system permissions. So, what could possibly go wrong? Um, it's it's there. It sort of depends on what you need it to do. You do have to worry a little bit about non-standard paths, particularly if you want to persist storage through OS updates. Um, so the other thing that I sort of discovered was that Termux does like to freeze on occasion, particularly with certain Android builds, um, and there's really not much you can do. So what you can do is sort of remove Termux like I did before, and then reinstall Termux. That's almost like doing a Control-Alt-Delete to make it work, but it does seem to make it work on occasion where it's really messed up. Um, you could try rebooting the phone, maybe that will work, but now that Android has upgraded to 10, I'm at least having issues rebooting the phone. Oh, I'm sorry, but the Android, um, like the other thing that you can do for Android is to reboot the phone if you don't want to try uninstalling and reinstalling. The issue that I personally had with Android 10, which recently came out, is that sometimes the phone doesn't like to be rebooted anymore. So you have to force reboot it, and that's getting really ugly, and I would prefer it if I didn't have to do that. So, yeah, it's not a perfect environment by any means. So I'll talk about the two ways to install. The first is Google Play Store, which is just a regular Google Play Android application that you install. It's a $1.99 charge or whatever it is, a trivial charge to install it. The second way is via the F-Droid marketplace, which is an open source marketplace. Um, and I'm going to share a couple of slides on this just because it's interesting. So F-Droid, I'm going to go off on this tangent because it's fun. So if you browse to fdroid.org, you basically have to then download a custom APK file, which is an Android executable. You then have to go through the hoops for Android to install an APK from non-blessed Google location. This can be done. It's not as fun as one would like. Like, you have to basically go into your settings, say, are you sure you want to do this? Yes. Are you really sure you want to do this? Yes. And then at that point, you can install the F-Droid marketplace. If you want to install the F-Droid marketplace on a Chrome device, the only way you can do this is to actually turn on the developer mode of the Chrome book itself, which is entirely non-trivial to do. The F-Droid, basically, there is a way to do it, but it takes about 2 hours to complete, and I wouldn't really recommend it for the benefit of doing this. But it does work, and if you need an application there, it might be the only way you can get it. So, yeah, a security dance, but it does work. You do have different categories of applications, just like you would see within Android Play, games, graphics, development, and also Termux actually falls under the development category, so it's good. And there is a bunch of different offerings within Termux on the F-Droid marketplace in addition. So NLinux is a Linux environment that runs on top of Termux. So if you wanted to have a regular Debian machine running on Termux, you can do that. The caveat here is that it takes a long time to download, and you sort of need to know, and you still have the same limitations of the original Termux. So it's a little bit unstable. Some applications aren't there as you're expecting. If you want that environment, it does work, but it's still a little bit of a gotcha. So this is sort of loosely the type of things that you can do that are the additional add-ons for Termux. Termux API for getting to the other aspects of the device. Termux boot to run a boot script on startup. So like if you have SSH daemons that you want to run or a web server daemon, you could put it there. Termux widget and Termux task and float are just basically different integrations into the Google Android home screen they can sort of have um, to run and configure the Termux environment. It's sort of cool, but like you're not really getting too much more for those additional things. There is also Termux tutorials. These are basically applications, excuse me, that um, show you different commands to do interesting things. So like one of the Termux um, um, tutorials is sort of more hacking based. So it shows you how to look at all the Wi-Fi SIDs and all of the other type things, which frankly you can do on other Linux devices, but it's just running on Termux. The caveat with that is that they're all unofficial. So they're loaded with ads, and you have to click through ads and all those annoying things that people do to make the extra buck. But they're there. You can install SSH and run it. I'm going to try to do this as a demo. Okay. So on my cell phone, I'm going to type, who am I? I am U0 underscore A465. I am going to now set a password for myself, and I realize that that the instructions I'm reading off are incredibly small, but I'll post it to the website. I'm going to set a password for myself. Oh, of course it's okay. So as of last week, these instructions worked. Now they seem like they're not working. So I'm not going to be able to show this demo because they changed the way that they're authenticating Termux users. Boo. So what I will do instead is I'll just close out of it and continue the presentation. I'll get back to that at some point. Yeah, close. Okay, so moving back from that demo, which on a good day would have worked, but you know how SSH works, hopefully. So there are additional options for running Linux as a non-root user. The Linux was what I mentioned before, which allows you to have a template on top of Termux. There's also a unique application called Userland. Userland allows you to run graphical SSH or graphical sessions on your Android device with like a full home directory and that type of stuff, so a full desktop environment, which is reasonably cool. But you still have the same limitations as Termux with it being single user mode, etc. The other thing is that because graphics requires such huge libraries, um, like it does take 20 minutes plus just to try to get a single install of an OS installed on your phone. So it's not ideal. The other thing is that you still have the same limitations of if you crash the system, you have to reinstall and re-download the entire OS. So it's not ideal. It does work. Um, Chrome OS Linux Experiment is a reasonably new addition to Chrome OS devices. So what essentially that is it's a Debian container, but it's not really a container, but it sort of is, that um, allows you to run Linux on your Android device. And the people at the Fredericksburg lug was reasonably impressed with it because they were able to get um, like some hard to install applications to just work, and it just worked. Um, yeah, and yeah, it it works well when it works. Yes, yeah, that's what I've discovered so far is depending on what you're trying to do, like these environments work well. Um, and just like the Android environment, it was just different enough where you aren't UID 0, so you can't really open port 80. You have to do all the magical port dance and that type of stuff. I'll do a super quick demo just because I can. So I'm not sure if you can sort of see on the screen or not, but on the left-hand times, the termux, uh, the termux and the userland experiment use very close icons. The difference is that the termux one is completely black, and the Google one is more of a gray. So, oh yeah, oops, sorry about that. So we can touch files. Um, the other thing we can do is if we do the ID, it's actually giving my own Chrome ID as my own user ID, which is sort of normal. We can actually sudo to root, but still not quite root, if that makes sense. Right. You're not root on the Android device. You're root within the virtual machine. The other thing you can do is like no, Pro's already installed. I don't know. Let's see here. It works. The So it's reasonably fast. It works even on the older Android like Chromebook devices. I have a few. It works. It's stable. Like the nice thing about Chromebooks is that the operating system is sort of installed automatically by Google, and the security and patches are applied automatically. But it's you're sort of limited as to what you can actually run within these devices. Yes. Yes, it is. It is only for 5 years, and it depends on the serial number, on the actual device, and all the other craziness. So, the at a certain point, all of these things just sort of go into a landfill of previous devices. What? That's true. You can do that too. And I mean, it does work and you're synced across all of your devices, and like, this is one of the many devices I have, so it's all good. Let me go back one. All right. So this is sort of my conclusion and takeaway slide. It's possible. It's different. It's unstable, but it's usable. So if you need to SSH over to another box, it's a perfect environment for it. If you want to start developing your own applications, there's a 50% chance it will work. But if it works, it works. So that largely is a presentation. What questions do people have, if any that I haven't answered? Yes. The well, that's a question. Uh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Uh, so the HTTP. So there's two. The two questions are the application that I'm using, which is unfortunately, uh, that's the correct answer. Like, I mean, but I mean, to be fair though, I mean, like, I developed this application on a Windows machine, and that's just because, like, I don't like when I tried to and put different OS on the Windows machine, it didn't take and all that other nonsense. So I'm using it. So I'm using Office. It's Office PowerPoint. Uh, exactly. Yeah. So for the streaming, that's a different question. Um, and let me see here. I'm going to. Understand. So I believe the answer here is that at this point, no. But there might be other applications, particularly within the F-Droid environment, that would allow you to do that. You could. So, depending on how the next presentation is coming along. Yeah, I'm interested in that actually because the number there is a normal Android application where you can do stuff. Okay. So long. Farewell. Exactly. Yes. You from within Termux you can. The caveat is that each hardware within Termux is sort of done it independently. So like turning on the flashlight the on the phone, I was able to do that. Taking a photo, like it took a photo, it just didn't look like a photo. So yeah, like it was sort of like all it was like a square looking thing as compared to let me rephrase. It was like multiple dots, multiple squares within a photo as compared to a photo. So yeah, so it's like it's unique. When it works, it works. It's and the other thing too is that since it is open source, they are actively developing it. So this might
Alright, since all you all know that I'm a loud person, I'm gonna go ahead and do it this way. Let me do one last thing real quick. Okay. Alright. I will throw my usual caveat. This is hastily put together because I didn't have much time between knowing that I may have to do this and doing it. I had seen a write up about three different command line presentation tools. I looked at all three, and this was the one I preferred. I forget the name of the other two, so please don't ask. I will put the link to the original article in the bottom of this when I get home tonight before it gets uploaded to the website. So if you want to look at the other two, feel free. I just felt this was the coolest one to do. So this is MDP, which is a terminal-based presentation tool. What is we're going to talk about what is MDP, installing MDP, creating, and I would have done running presentations, but I ran out of time. So that will be added to the end of the slide as well, and I'll make it much more descriptive since I can't talk about it. This presentation is in MDP. Yes, so I I'm very much a fan of eat your own dog food. So if you're going to talk about it, you got to use it. So yes, this is done in MDP, running on Terminator. So there are there's some formatting that may or may not work. There's one specifically that does not work in the presentation side of Terminator, but it does in the source of it, and I don't know why, and obviously didn't have time to figure it out. So at least for this, we're going to talk about what it is, installing and creating, and then I'll be more detailed on the running MDP. I'll explain how to start it because it's easy. So MDP is fading, I don't know. MDP is a markdown presentation software. It supports some basic markdown formatting. There are some higher level formats in markdown that don't work, and there are a couple other bits and pieces that it supports too, especially regarding links. And again, that'll be in a comment note in the presentation. It'll be easy to download because it'll all be text based, so you can look at it in any text editor. It runs on most Linux, Mac, FreeBSD, and Windows. If you use the Linux subsystem or Cygwin, it'll work in both. It needs ncurses W to compile from source. If you're running on Pi with Raspbian, you will need libcurses 5-dev and libncurses W5-dev, which I assume is present in everywhere else. So this was actually, I do have it installed on a Pi. I just couldn't get the Pi set up. I was going to do the presentation off of the Pi. But I installed just from Package Manager. So it's available in the repos for Ubuntu, Debian. If you're on Mac, with Brew, Slackware, and Arch. The source and documentation can be found on GitHub, and then it expands to other bits of documentation for Markdown and the actual formatting. I like how it comes into view and then fades out. That really annoys me. Yeah, and when I did this, the profile I used in Terminator was black with white text, which doesn't really work on a presentation, so I hadn't tested here. So installing from packages. On Arch, you can use an existing AUR package. Cygwin, you can use, it has MDP in the startup programs. Debian and the rest you can use from, or Debian and Ubuntu, you can use apt, but all the different ways to find it. In uh, Obviously, with Linux subsystem for Windows, it depends on which Linux you install. It'll be there, and I believe it's in the in the package manager for Fedora. To install from source, you can clone the GitHub repo, make install, and then there's a sample presentation in there, and just run that to verify. Um, Presentations are created in a text editor using an abbreviated markdown, not, as I mentioned before, not all markdown tags are available. There are some extras, such as you can, what you saw with the, before when I had the link up there. I forget the name of that formatting, but it's not specifically markdown, so there are some other bits and pieces. I haven't tried all the markdown tags, so you'll have to play around with it to see which ones work and which ones don't. It'll be a trial and error thing. You can also, if you have if you share terminal ever, have several people in on your terminal, you can run it on there. That's a really good use for it. It doesn't take much in the way of resources, so you could probably you could do it on a Pi 1, which is very small. Going with Zak's, you could probably run it on, if you could get it to compile, you could probably run it on Android. So there are so many different options, and that's one of the things I like, and you'll probably see me learning more about this, and when I do presentations, I'll probably use it. Plus, you can create it anywhere you have a text editor. It's done in Markdown in text, so you can use, horrible things like Word or Notepad, or that put that strange formatting at the end that Linux doesn't understand. Or you could use Vi, or if you prefer Emacs. I'm not going to start a war on that. There are some limitations. Obviously, you're running in a terminal, so no graphics, no audio, and no video. and Zach got it up and running, so it will run on Android. The formatting is also limited depending on the type of terminal you're on. So, like I said, you'll see an example of one that it's strange. It works when I'm creating it in Vi, but it doesn't work in the presentation. So, some of the creating the presentation. You'll notice up at the top, you'll always see intro to MDP. Down at the bottom, my name and the number of slides and where I am. Those are done with a % sign title for the title, author for my name, and the slide count comes up automatically. I'm sure you can get rid of the slide count, and I know that it also accepts % date, but with the slide count there, that takes precedence and it doesn't show. The title will always be top, unless you figure out a way to make it otherwise. It looks like the title will always be top centered. The author will be bottom left, and bottom right will show the slide count. Slide breaks. So as I said, this is a single text file, so it will take a horizontal rule as a way to separate slides. In looking at, there are two other ways to do it, but to me, having the horizontal rule makes it much more readable, and you can distinguish between different slides much easier. The other two were a lot more subtle, and you could get lost in them. But I, so you get what I want, not all the choices. And by the way, it does work with presentation things, so that's a cool thing too. Um, to center text, you use dash, greater than, to open, and less than dash to close the centered text. Everything in between will be centered. You cannot have text before or after those tags, or it won't work. And you'll notice that it is used on all of the slide titles that I've done in the presentation, just to make them look good. One thing, if I had a little more time, I'd try to figure out is a way to bring down the actual text of the slide to separate it, but I didn't have time to do that, so sorry. You can ignore markdown tags in two ways. Three backslash or backticks at the start and the end of a block of text, as in the line before, block of text, line after, have the three ticks. You'll notice some of the text that we've had so far. Okay, like it's hard to see on the white background, but the horizontal rule, that line is gray. If you're doing this on white text on a black background, that will actually show up as white, and it's a lot more distinct, and I couldn't figure out how to make it different. I personally don't like that. It stands out too much, but that's a little more subtle. And then to escape a single tag would be a backslash. So in the case of this particular line, I had to put backslash backslash. So that ignored that way it would ignore the backslash tag, just like you do when you're writing a bash shell script, or a shell command to escape special characters. The hashtag is what creates the or headings. So a single and it has to be on the first line or before the text. And a single hashtag will have a heading 1, double hashtag for 2, etc. All the headings, slide titles are done with the heading 1, so it puts them into different color and underlines. I forget, I did look at heading 2 and some of the others. I just kind of forgot and didn't put them on here. There are two types of lists that you can have. You can have an unordered list using HTML terminology, as opposed to a little dot or a star or whatever. It'll give you a plus minus for the distinction. You can also have an ordered list, a numbered list, and that starts the number dot whatever, so 1, 2, 3. And you do have to remember the numbering yourself, so it doesn't automatically number them for you, which is a shame, but such is life. Highlighting text, you can highlight with a double asterisk before and after the text you want to highlight. That text cannot be on the first line of your or the first character of the line, or it'll assume it's a unordered list. But if you start text asterisk asterisk text asterisk asterisk, that text will all be highlighted in purple. No spaces between the asterisk and the text that you want to highlight. A single asterisk is supposed to make it in italics. This is the example that works when I'm editing the file. So if I'm looking at this in Vi, the word italics is in italics. But for some reason, when I do the presentation, it shows up as highlighted. So bear that in mind that sometimes there may be some differences. You just have to test what it'll do. And then I think, and then putting links in. The format is bracket, whatever the or square brackets for around whatever the name you want to be, and then parentheses around the link, and it'll show up as these do: Google bracket 0 bracket, and then Novolog bracket 01, and the links show up down on the bottom left with their referenced number. So, and if you're in a terminal and you happen to be in a terminal on your machine, if you click on the links, it will open that link in a browser. Probably doesn't work well if you don't have X on your machine and you're running a server, but at least it'll be there for somebody to copy. And then that's kind of it. And like I said, I'll have links and further information when I upload it to the website, or when Roger puts it up on the website tonight. So, yeah. Okay, what if you have a machine that is really old and it can't support LibreOffice? Because LibreOffice does take a fair amount of resources. So if you have an older machine or an older Raspberry Pi, that it can technically it can run Office, but it runs dog ass slow. And if you have anything else running, it's beyond painful. So that's one reason. Another reason is if you're sharing a terminal remotely, which you can do. If you're I forget the tool that you can use to do it, but I'm here. One of the jobs I had, I was here. The two guys I worked with were in Dublin, and quite often we shared terminal sessions, and I could throw it there. So there are uses for it. In general, no, you're probably not going to use this. I will, because I'm a geek that way. But in general, you know, it's a kind of specialized thing. Um, The other thing is, for example, when I admit I wrote a lot of this while Zach was talking because I decided to go ahead and do it. Um, when I sat down and Zach started talking, I only had 4 slides. So in less than an hour of me sorry Zach, halfway paying attention to Zach because I did contribute. Halfway paying attention to Zach and writing it in less than an hour, I threw up 13 more slides. And it was very fast. It was very easy to do. Granted, the slides aren't, they aren't a lot of material on all the slides, but still to do that in Word or in PowerPoint or in Impress or Google Slides or whatever would have taken more time because I'd have had to do more to get the formatting in place, pointing, clicking, hitting buttons. Whereas I could just type this out very quickly. So speed, it's to me, a lot faster. But then I also prefer command line over GUIs. So, yes. I haven't found it. I know there are a lot of keyboard shortcuts that you can do. Uh, yeah, so I'm sure there are ways to do it. Just I knew I'd be up here with my presenter, which for a presenter you're gonna go. Um, and I think even when you start MDP, you can start it from a specific slide, um, but you'd have to look at the man page to be sure. Any other questions? Go for it. Throw out an unrelated question. All right, guys, we're gonna go ahead and shut down the stream because we're just talking and I don't have a way to get everybody the mic. So see you all next month. Thanks.